I'll call the work session of the Board of County Commissioners to order for April the 4th, 2011. I want to welcome everybody that's here. We have the agenda that is before us. There are some additions that is on the back page of the back of the second page that we have. If everybody's had a chance to look over the agenda for today, do I have a motion, or is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Just in regards to the consent order, or consent agenda, do we have a motion to place the items under F, consent agenda, onto our regular session of April the 18th?
So moved.
We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. In regards to, if we start at old business, the first is the APAC recommendations. Commissioner Cabarrus asked for that to be reset for later in the meeting.
Yeah, we can do that.
We'll take care of that. The next is the APFO voluntary mitigation payment adjustment for current year 2011. That is the discussion in regards to what the amount should be based on the standards. We have not received a decision back from the Supreme Court, I believe.
That is correct, yes.
So I was thinking that until we get a decision from them, I think the better thing is just to move this out for another 60 or 90 days, because it may be moot at that point in time.
Maybe we table this till the August.
Okay. We have a motion to table this till our August work session meeting. We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next matter is a rezoning matter that, is there any information we need to have at this point in time, Mr. Cook?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, actually, you have before you a letter that I wrote to one of the new property owners who received this property by descent due to the fact that the prior owner passed away. What we have in this situation is an appeal of this rezoning to be heard by this board. The actual applicant was a man, Steve Fisher, who had a contract to buy the property, and he asked to have it rezoned. Typically, we require that the property owner also sign the rezoning application, so there's no issue about the rezoning if it were to be approved or denied. In this situation, the applicant, or the person that had it under contract, Mr. Fisher, has decided to withdraw his application for rezoning. However, we cannot get a consent to the withdrawal from the property owner because in the meantime, the prior owner passed away. There are now 5 children that jointly own the property. This letter that you have before you is the one of the children who resides here locally. She is in agreement to withdraw the application for rezoning, but has not been able to get the consent of her other siblings. So what I've suggested is that you go ahead and set it on for hearing for April 18th and just deal with it one way or the other, and hopefully we'll have a withdrawal from her and her siblings before that date.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Cook?
Excuse me.
If we have a hearing and we deny the application, it doesn't prevent them from refiling a rezoning request down the road.
But they have to wait a year to do so.
They have to wait a year?
They have to wait a year to do so. I pointed that out to her in this letter. Like I say, she's in agreement, but she's just having some difficulty dealing with some out-of-town brothers and sisters who don't really understand the situation. So based on what she and I discussed, I just memorialized it in this letter so that she could pass it on to them so they could see what they were dealing with. And hopefully we'll have an answer from all of them by April 18th. Attached to my letter is a copy of the letter of withdrawal from the original applicant, Mr. Fisher, and we now have a signed copy of that letter. And then also the letter between the brokers involved in the transaction in which they, in which it's pointed out that he is terminating the contract to purchase. So,
with her not being, with her would it not be prudent also to send this letter, a copy of your letter, to all the siblings or all the possible devisees, I should say?
Well, I could. She said she was going to distribute it to them. Like I say, some of them are out of town. I don't know any of their names, but
Okay.
they apparently won't rely on her to deal with it herself, even though apparently she was handling the affairs of her late mother. But there's been no estate set up, and there's no administrator of the estate, so we're at this point having to deal with
Okay.
all of them. I'd understood that Ms. Moore might be here today, but I don't know her, but I don't think she's here.
Mrs. Moore, are you here? Okay.
She may appear, and she may have several of her brothers and sisters come to the April 18th
Okay.
meeting. So hopefully we can deal with it then, and if I hear from her in the meantime, then I'll advise you.
Okay. Any other questions? We have a motion to place this under new business for April the 18th.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Under 4, the resolution authorizing the auction sale of the Bethel School property. That is on page 51. Mr. Downs, this is just, do we need to adopt another resolution?
Yes, sir. Yeah, so we can open it back up. We've already spoken to a couple of new potential bidders or people that wanted to submit proposals. So
Okay.
we need to adopt a new resolution and advertise.
Any questions from Mr. Downs?
Do we need to suspend the rules to
We-
adopt this today so that they can move forward with it?
We can either do that today, or we can wait until April the 18th. I don't think in doing it today prevents.
That will help us. Thought it was still, that will help us move it along if we can.
Okay.
I just noticed on the resolution it had today's date, so I was
Right, and
bringing
that's
that
what I
up.
was going to address next, is that although, do we have a motion to suspend the rules for the Board of Commissioners in order to adopt this resolution today, to start the process starting today?
So moved.
We have a
Second.
motion, we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next is, do we have a motion to adopt the resolution as attached, which allows sealed bids will be accepted until 3 p.m. on Friday, May the 6th, and the board will award the bid at its May the 16th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Now, the new business that we have before us is the Community Advisory Committee's 2010 Annual Report. Mrs. Abinader, good to see you again.
I'm actually Karen Pettinger,
Ah.
and I'm one of the volunteers. Lori Ebenader is with me today. She's the Regional Ombudsman with the Central Line Area Agency on Aging. And I'm pleased to be here to present our annual report to you. Thank you for having me. Just a reminder of what we do. We have 2 committees. We have an Adult Care Home Committee and a Nursing Home Committee, and we're all volunteers. And we are working with Lori in the facilities that we visit to assist and promote resident rights. And we are there as representatives of the community in the interest of long-term care residents. And we also are involved in resolving grievances that the residents bring to our attention before they become full-blown complaints. So we are very happy to be able to do this work. And Lori is excellent backup for us in resolving the more difficult issues that we encounter. The report that we present to you today is just seven areas. I generally wanted to highlight that all the facilities in Cabarrus County were visited this year. There are 11 adult care homes, there are 7 nursing homes, there's 1 family care home, So we have 19 long-term care facilities in the county with over 1,600 licensed beds. Although we only have 1/3 of the number of volunteers that the state statutes require, we did our best. We did visit the homes, and we were involved in many instances of resolving grievances that the residents brought to our attention through using the administrative staff of the facility to help us resolve those problems, and then on subsequent visits we do follow up to make sure that residents are satisfied with the resolution of the grievance. If not, then we can call in other resources to help us. Committees involved with family members, we spent over 500 hours in the facilities, all 10 of us, 4 on the nursing home committee and 6 on the adult home committee. We had our 10th annual resident rights luncheon in October. We had over 150 residents and staff and volunteers and dignitaries from the county, and I know several of you have come in previous years, and you're also invited this year, and you will get an invitation to our annual resident rights luncheon. On page 2 of this report, which I'm probably 118 of your, I don't know, whatever page you're on, one of the questions we are asked to answer by the state are the problems encountered by us and major problems that affect the residents. And other than the usual, we don't have enough volunteers, which, again, I said we do our best, we did have some major issues in a couple of the facilities in the county, and one major one was a transition of ownership from one entity to another, wherein over $14,000 of residents' personal funds went missing in this transition. You know, the personal funds that they get. I personally was involved in hearing this in one of the facilities when a resident brought to my attention, "Where's my money? I don't have any money. I can't buy soap. I need shampoo. I need some clothes." And in investigating that, we did find out that in this particular transition, all this cash went stolen from the previous owners. The new owners couldn't find a record of it anywhere. So this was escalated to the state, and found out that it had mushroomed into other facilities in other counties. So it's an issue that now is in investigation where it needs to be, which is at the state level. Some residents have received some of their personal funds in increments, and others are still awaiting that. And it just does remain an ongoing investigation, but it was troubling to come across this kind of an issue where, you know, people get $60 a month for all their personal needs, and they had nothing. So hopefully we'll be able to get some of that money back for them. We were involved in grievances during this year. We do have some excellent facilities in Cabarrus County. Many of them are upgrading. They're finding ways to, just buy new furniture, hire enough staff. We don't have quite the turnover of staff that we used to. I think that's probably part of the economy. We do have an issue of not enough organized programs, and we're hoping that we can get some more volunteers in these facilities. Like hospitals have organized volunteer programs. We don't have that in long-term care facilities. They just don't exist. So we're hoping that maybe we can develop some of that so we can have less lonely, bored people we find in these facilities. For the future, we are still using the local media to recruit more volunteers, and our subcommittee that I had, the adult care home, we divided into 2 subcommittees, one for daytime, one for evening weekends, so we attracted 2 working volunteers who were able to join us this year. So we can make visits at nights and weekends, which gives you a different perspective of what's going on in the facilities. You also get to meet more family members, and we do like to talk to family members. And we will increase our efforts to visit and continue to visit all of our facilities quarterly, as well as make friendly visits, activity visits, and just generally be your presence, community's presence in our facilities. Any questions?
Any questions?
Yeah, and I don't know how because of the shortage, something we've dealt with. I've been on the board 10 years, been dealing with it for 10 years. We've never had enough people.
Right.
How do we get, any ideas how we get?
That's what I would ask you.
Word spread. I mean, if I
Like
even
any
put a
program
pill out
that
there-
relies on volunteers. Most of the new volunteers have come from us
Yeah.
that know our friends. We've put articles in the paper, little blurbs under Around Your Corner in the Independent Tribune, and made some presentations to senior clubs, church
gonna
groups,
ask you about
parish
church
nurse
groups.
program,
Yeah.
you know, wherever we can, wherever we're invited to say a few words, somebody will be, you know, available to do
Okay.
that. And we've asked the facility administrators, because
Mhm.
the statute says a third of us should come from recommendations from the facilities. We have never gotten anybody from the facilities.
Okay.
But every time we make a visit, we do an exit interview, I mention it again. If you know anybody, send them our way.
I was thinking, I don't know if the different nursing programs in the county, if part of the nursing programs, they are required to help out and do some community service. If that is an opportunity to maybe touch base with the nursing programs, number one. And then number two is, I don't know if you yourself or somebody with your group or agency is able to, or is willing to go to the different service clubs and maybe do a presentation about the important aspect of this, because I don't think this reduces the importance of the program, but it's almost, to me, it's the Better Business Bureau for long-term care. You know, y'all go in.
Well
and
put,
I
yes.
mean, that, you know, is that y'all are a good area, a collective of information in regards to the long-term care facilities. And it's, if there's a complaint, y'all lodge it and y'all address it. But I look at it as y'all are more of a Better Business Bureau for them.
When people know what we do, they ask us about what are your recommendations for facilities, what is a good facilities, what are not so good facilities, and we tell them. I've been doing this for 11 years in these
Right.
facilities, and I could tell you which ones I would put, you know, a family or a friend in, and which ones I probably would think twice about. So-
Well, if you do have someone in the organization that can come out to some of the different service organizations, please let me know, because I may be able to
We
help you.
do. I'll be glad to.
Okay.
And some of the other volunteers, I'm sure, would be more than happy to be on the agenda.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. There's no action that we need to take on this matter, just is for a report. Next is G2, is the Health Alliance proclamation as it relates to the Health Alliance. Dr. Pilkington, if you'll step up, just in case there's any questions. I am the liaison to the Health Alliance, and I asked that we place this on here as a proclamation. I would ask that we consider suspending the rules and adopt the proclamation today, and the reason why is this is the 100th year anniversary of the Health Alliance here in Cabarrus County. And there's a lot of things, I don't know if everybody had a chance to look at the resolution or the proclamation, but there's a lot of good things that our Health Alliance has done here. And I asked Dr. Pilkington to be available to answer any questions that this Board of Commissioners may have as it relates to this matter. But it is 100 years as of April, this is today.
As of yesterday.
Yesterday, excuse me. 100 years as of yesterday in regards to having a Health Alliance here in Cabarrus County. But the resolution is that Cabarrus County Public Health is a national health pioneer and one of the first comprehensive rural urban public health programs in the United States, organized April 3rd, 1911. Its measures to control and eliminate infectious disease, improve environmental sanitation, and promote healthy lifestyle practices have been the greatest cause of the improved health status and increased life expectancy for Cabarrus County residents. The Health Alliance was the first to administer the Salk vaccine countywide in 1955. Was the first in the state to have a non-medical health public health director. It was the first public health department in North Carolina. First, to have locally funded full-time HIV/AIDS counselor on staff. First and only North Carolina Public Health Department to go through the Public Health Accreditation Board beta test. We are the first to be a public health authority for which we were awarded the NACCHO Model Practice Award in 2006. The first North Carolina local health department to adopt Model for Improvement Quality Improvement Program, and was one of the first counties of a comparable size to place public health nurse/school nurse in each public school in the county, established August 1999. And there was an article in yesterday's paper, I believe, about Cabarrus County being the 8th healthiest county in the state. Seventh, excuse me. I don't mean to reduce our ranking.
We don't want to lose that one place.
But there's a lot of things that have been, that the Health Alliance has done, and I think it needs to be recognized, and that's the reason why I brought it to everybody's attention today. And if there's any questions, feel free to ask Dr. Pilkington or myself, more preferably Dr. Pilkington, because he will have the answers.
I would say also, we have the actual minutes from the April 3rd meeting, if anyone would like to see them. They will be going on our history wall in our new building, so that to commemorate that 100th-year anniversary. It's kind of neat to look at those and go back and see the 100-year-old minutes.
What was the budget that year?
I would say probably less than $100. We can't quite go back there.
Yeah, it is all relative. I would make a motion to suspend the rules.
I'll second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. And do we have a motion to adopt this proclamation, as I previously read, recognizing Cabarrus Health, or the Public Health Month in Cabarrus County, and recognize the celebration of the Health Alliance and commemorating 100 years of public service in Cabarrus County?
So moved.
We have a motion, we have a second.
And I will second that, and I'd like for us also to, recognize this again at our meeting, regular meeting on the 18th.
We'll do that.
Okay.
We have a motion to adopt this, and also to add this to our April the 18th meeting to recognize it once
under
again.
our recognition portion of the meeting. So.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Under G3 is the approval, finance approval of contract and amendment between the county and Genesis, and the CJPP application for continuation of implementation funding. Mr. Daniels? Thank you. CJPP, for some people you may not know, is the Criminal Justice Partnership Program, and this goes through, obviously, our court system. And there needs to be a provider for different services for probation and parole. I'll turn it over to you.
Correct. This is my first time here, as you may know, and I didn't actually know I would be doing this, but I am an administrative director for Genesis here in Concord. I've been there about a year and a half, and we are the providers for the CJPP program here in Cabarrus County. We provide long-term, short-term substance abuse treatment for probationers who often may get a suspended sentence. They may come to us from the court, the judge putting them in our program, or probation officers themselves can have a probationer that they feel would benefit from substance abuse treatment with charges that may or may not be directly related to substance abuse, but things like forgery, larceny, but with the thoughts being that all of that's stemming from their substance abuse, and if we can treat their substance abuse, then their criminal behaviors will go away. So that's what we do here in Cabarrus County. We offer, as I said, the long-term substance abuse. It's about a 6-month program. Then we also offer short-term substance abuse. It's about 10 weeks. And then we offer a variety in between the two, depending on what our certified or licensed counselors make recommendations for those probationers. That's in a nutshell.
This is, if it's not a complete pass-through, the $131,000 comes from the state, or it's subject to the budget of the state. It is a pass-through through the Board of Commissioners. If it is not a 100% pass-through, it's a very minimal amount that the county contributes. I'm not certain what that amount is, but if memory serves me correctly, it's a complete pass-through from the state, so that if we were to approve this contract, then it would be subject to whatever the state decides to do in their budget.
That's correct.
Are there any questions for me or Mr. Daniels?
Is this the first year? I think this is the first year we've done this with Genesis, right, or is it?
Genesis was the contractor last year.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
But they picked it up mid-year, I believe, because the other provider was dropped by
Okay.
CJPP.
Okay.
So they
Got it.
stepped in, caught up the backlog, and then has kept providing services from there. And I think it was almost, it may not have been midway through the year, but it was probably a quarter way through the year that y'all picked up, from what I remember.
Right.
How many people does this program service?
It's amazing since I have been there. As I said, we primarily get clients through the probation office or the court system, and neither of the judges, Superior Court judges that we had the entire previous fiscal year, either weren't aware of the program, didn't believe in the program, didn't know how to get people into the program, so it just really took a dive. We were down to about 4 or 5 clients by December. But then Judge Spainhour came on the bench, who's very pro-CJPP, and we now have, since the beginning of the year, about 30 clients in that program.
It fluctuates either with the judges or with attorneys that request a client to be recommended for that program, because not everybody should be going into the program. Some, and it's just a matter, I think it's a combination of attorney as well as a judge realizing that the person before him or her would benefit from this program.
If we did not approve it,
Mhm.
then I guess service would not be available to the local court district?
Correct. And
Then all these people would be going into our penal system.
well, they may not go into the penal system, but they would end up, there's a lot of different, you never know what would happen.
Yeah.
But there is no monies coming from the county. This is just a complete pass-through.
Okay.
This is, if it's the same as it was, it's providing treatment to substance abusers. In the past, I know there was a reduction in recidivism among those who took this treatment. And it is all county money. I just got a verification. I'm sorry, it's all state money. There's no county money in it whatsoever.
One other thing to be aware of is that not knowing what is going on in regards to the budget and what is being pushed down to the county, I think that we need to start recognizing how do we keep recidivism from occurring? How do we keep people from coming back into the court system if at all possible? Because I think I told everybody last time is there has been talk about people serving sentences, having the county cover more people serving sentences. And that if this keeps them out and gets them the treatment so that they don't come back, it will end up saving the county money in the long run. So, any other questions?
I would make a motion can we put it under consent?
We can certainly
For
put
this
it under
one?
consent, yes.
Then I would make a motion to place it under consent with the understanding that the state budget, that was pending the verification of the state funding,
That's in the suggested motion.
which is what you said.
That is yes, that is in there already.
If the state doesn't kick in the full amount,
We don't pick up anything. If the state funds $1, then we don't come in with the extra $131,346. So we're not obligated at all.
Okay, I second then the motion.
We have a motion and a second to place this under consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could just make a comment. While we're talking about this particular subject, there is also some discussion going on about requiring counties to begin some programs to either address recidivism or to use alternative means, such as house arrest and monitoring and that sort of thing to reduce the number of people in jail so that we have more room to house the state prisoners that they want to send to us. And that's not just happening here. I heard a report from Arizona, exactly the same thing is happening there for their General Assembly, is planning on doing the same thing that's being discussed here, is forcing counties to house those who have been already sentenced.
And I think there's been some emails that we've gotten collectively talking about misdemeanants, and for everybody to be aware, from what I understand in the bill that's introduced, the bill that it is introduced is requiring counties to have people that serve a sentence of 12 months or less be housed in the county facility. Misdemeanors, the most you can get on a misdemeanor is 150 days. So anything over 150 days is a felony. And there are some Class I and Class H felonies that could fit into the 12-month sentence, just for everybody to know.
Earlier today, I was talking with Kevin Leonard, who's the chief legislative lobbyist for the association, and kind of point out to him, and I think that it's not just the operational cost, because I know he told me that there was some way they were looking at how to look at capacity in the county jails and going to the maybe leasing blocks of cells from counties where there was space. But I told him too about the capital side of it was going to be a bigger piece, because it creates a whole new burden on counties then to provide the space in the future. And so I don't know whether that discussion has even been part of the equation or not.
Yeah. Next, we have G4. It is the Food Policy Council 2011 Retreat Report, Mission Statement, Goals, and Logo. At this time, I would call on, what do we have? Mr. Newton, Aaron Newton. And I suggested that instead of having the full report done today, that I think it's more important that we have it on the 18th. But Mr. Newton's here to give us an overview and any further detail that he would like to give us.
Certainly. David Kataja and Chris Jones, two of the committee chairs for the Food Policy Council, are going to join and brief you all at the regular session regarding the retreat that was held on, planning retreat for the Food Policy Council, which was held on February 19th. And the results of that retreat were a mission statement, which fulfills part of the charge that the council was given by the Board of Commissioners when it was created. So they have certainly crossed that off the list. They also came up with a long list of goals, things they wanted to accomplish within the community in regards to local food. And then at the March meeting, they all voted to give all the council members, not just the ones who were able to attend the retreat, a chance to vote, and came up with a list of the top 5. And those are provided for you all as well. The committees are all adopting individual goals, and they'll be working through those goals. Probably most exciting at the March meeting, the Food Policy Council adopted its official logo, which you see here on the screen. What I thought was very exciting about this initiative is it was entirely citizen-run. In fact, this moved a long way through the process before they even allowed me to see it. So this was something where you had a group of citizens who really took this project and ran with it and came up with something that I think is really exciting. They have adopted it as their official logo, but the plan is for the council to come up with guidelines for others in the local food industry so that they can use this, certainly food producers, but restaurants, processors, distribution. And once those guidelines are in place, they're going to bring this logo and those guidelines back before the commissioners so that there'd be the potential to adopt it as a marketing campaign to try and promote local food. I thought it was a real success of the council, especially given that that was the level of ownership that these citizens took.
Are there any questions for Mr. Newton at this time? We have a motion to place this under new business. We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Next is the Cabarrus Arena and Event Center Storage Building Fair Office. Mr. Downs.
Okay, got this item, is actually, this building has been, sort of planned since we broke ground on the original complex out there. Sort of was value engineered at that time. We weren't quite sure what size it should be or where it should go, just based on what the schedule and the activities can be. So, it was actually placed on the CIP 5 years ago and has progressed up through the process of moving on up. So we're here, we've had bids on the project. It's, there's a 10,000 square foot building. It will be located at the, right on top of the location where the fair office is right now. That double wide trailer will be moved out and actually moved out to the farm for their use. The Fair Board has agreed that that is a good use for it, and so we are working on the logistics of getting that moved out there for some classroom space so that they can use that, have a little bit of office space and have a phone for emergencies as well, and then also have some classroom space available for the students at the farm. There were 7 bidders on the project, some local, some that weren't local. Actually, the contractor that built the original complex was one of the bidders as well. In tallying the bids, the low bidder was CM Black Construction for $664,160. Again, it's a storage building, and also the fair offices will be relocated to this building as well. So, and it will be a metal building. At first, we thought it was going to have to be look just like the rest of the buildings out there with the brick facade all the way around it, based on the location away from the main street. The city has waived that requirement, so it is just a metal building on a concrete slab. Any questions on that?
Any questions for Mr. Downs? Commissioner Burge?
Are the funds available to build it?
Yes, sir.
Is it coming out of the profits from the fairground?
There aren't any profits from the fairgrounds, but this is coming from the Capital Reserve Fund. It's a fund that the board established. It's where any money over 15% of fund balance each year was funneled into that, and the use is restricted to capital projects and not available for use in the general fund.
But it's not money been borrowed?
Oh, no.
It's already available?
Sitting in the bank.
That's
Have no other need for it?
I'm sorry?
I said, we have no other need for it?
There's always competing needs, I think, for any funding that the county has. In a case like this, where it's one-time money, it's certainly not going to help any recurring expenses. If there's another capital project, then it could certainly be used for that.
In regards to the need, it's replacing a portable building right now, is what the idea is.
That's correct. The fair office is a mobile home. There are several mini mobile units out on the back lot back there that we're leasing every month, so we're paying to lease those. And then also, a lot of the materials that would be going and stored in this building are actually having to be moved around the arena based on the show and the location of the show. If it's in the arena, they may, and there was stuff stored in there, they may have to move it out and put it over in the event center, and then the event center may have a show and they may have to move it back in there. So it's just being moved around just to accommodate the different shows. So,
How long will it take to get the building completed?
I believe it was 120 days, and we are very tight on schedule right now to get them in prior to the fair. And that's what our hopes were. If the board were to waive their rules once again, that would be wonderful. I'm sure Mr. Black would love us for that, because if not, then they would have to shut down construction for 2 weeks during the fair and then come back out, and I'm sure that would be logistically a nightmare for them as well.
It'd probably cost us more money, too.
Maybe, yes. Yeah, so that would be good. Now, the biggest thing is the metal buildings. There's like an 8-week turnaround on those buildings when you send off and have them engineered, and then it's about an 8-week process before we can even get the building back. So for the first 8 weeks, there'll be some site prep going on, but then we'll have to wait till the buildings get here, and that's what's causing the construction.
Well, will 2 weeks make a big difference in regards to?
Yes, it will on the design, it really will. But, you know,
If.
Mr. Black
if-
is here, he can explain it to you.
If there was if the consensus of this board is to place this under the consent agenda.
That would work.
Does the 2 weeks make a difference if it's under the consent agenda? I mean,
think-
obviously, it can be
I
pulled
think
off.
Mr.
but-
Black would feel comfortable if you're placing it under the consent agenda, that would be enough for him to go ahead and
Okay.
start the process.
Commissioner Remismer, I didn't want to cut you off. Did you have any questions?
Was this a building that was originally thought of in the original construction of the arena, or is it something that progressed over time that come as a need?
It was, when we first designed the complex, of course, that was a design in progress as we continued throughout building the entire complex. But at the time, we knew that there was not enough off-site or out of the leasable space. There was not enough storage available at that time. That's why it's progressed over the years of having to purchase additional pods. And if you go back past the fair office now, I think there's approximately six or eight buildings back in there now that we're leasing every month for that. It's gotten to the point now it really needs to get done.
Okay. Any further discussion? We have a motion to place this under consent agenda.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Next we have is G6, is text amendment as it relates to the ethanol fuel production. I call on Mrs. Morris.
Good afternoon. This is a proposed text amendment to our zoning ordinance to add ethanol fuel production as a permitted use. The ordinance currently does not have ethanol fuel production or fuel production at all as a listed use. We were approached by a citizen asking whether or not they could have a small still on their property to create ethanol and then mix it to use in various equipment on the property. They have a farm. And we started looking at it and realized we did not have that type of use in our ordinance, so it isn't covered. So this is somewhat similar to the tattoo use in that we don't have anything in our ordinance. What is proposed is to add it as fuel production, residential personal use, which would allow someone to manufacture it at their home if they could meet the criteria in the ordinance. And then it would also add small and medium plants based on the Code of Federal Regulations definitions to the ordinance, and would allow the small and medium plants only in general industrial districts. The small plant allows up to 10,000 proof gallons to be produced, and then medium allows between 10 and actually 500,000 to be produced. So this would allow someone to have the use as a hobby. That's essentially the conclusion that the Planning and Zoning Board came to, was after looking at the information, and you should have some pictures of what a personal still would look like, that it really would be more of a hobby than anything else because it's a little labor intensive based on what the end result is. Essentially, you get about 10% of whatever your batch is what you can actually use. So this would add a definition to the ordinance, add also to the permitted use charts and to the lists, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Susie, is there I guess on production, obviously, we probably have a few experts in the state that could know how to do this, but is there an ANSI standard or any kind of industry-wide standard for how the equipment is manufactured, how it's, the process that's followed? Because my biggest concern would be safety. And I know we have permitted by standards, but I wonder if we should put in our zoning ordinance that it meets like ANSI code such and such that would, for ethanol production or.
When it comes to the small and medium plants, they would be subject to those kind of regulations as well as any OSHA standards or anything that they would have to meet, because it would be more of a company. When you're talking about the ones at a residence or on a farm, Those folks actually have to go through the federal permitting process with Tobacco and Tax Bureau, and they end up with a permit for it. They also have to get a permit from the state, 2 permits, actually one from ABC and one from ALE. But as far as what is required, the only thing that the feds require, and the only things that they require for the plants, actually, is that it is under lock and key and that it is not attached to a dwelling unit. So that's where, when we started looking at this, decided that there really probably need to be some local standards implemented, because there just really aren't. And it's up to the agent that comes out to do the inspection as to whether or not they think it's appropriate.
How about setbacks from, if there's a little spark?
Well,
I mean,
the fire marshal's office has reviewed the text. Folks from the bomb squad also were involved in the text amendment and coming up with the language. In the fire marshal's office and the folks on the bomb squad are comfortable with the 60-foot setback from a dwelling unit, and then the 100-foot setback from a property line.
and it's 60 foot not only from the dwelling unit the property is on, but 60 foot from your neighbor's house.
That's correct, but that 100 feet would actually push them back further
Okay.
than the 60 that would be required if you had an accessory apartment or maybe an apartment over a garage or something like that on your own property. And again, the Planning and Zoning Board, they were comfortable with it. In the way that it was proposed, there was a lot of discussion about what size the parcel needed to be, whether or not setbacks needed to be increased. Also about what fuels the fire or fuels the boiler. Is it wood? Is it propane? How does all of that work? So they did have a lot of discussion about it and did decide that they were comfortable with this language to pass it on to you all then for more discussion and then final consideration.
Any other questions for Mrs. Morris? How, this is obviously supposed to be used for driving and not drinking.
That's correct.
That's where the federal government is supposed to step in, and
The
as they're
federal-
permitted, so they will probably come out and inspect it and see if it's for drinking or driving.
The federal government, the folks that have these stills are required to get the permit from the TTB. Once they
From
have
the-
that,
okay.
the Tax and Tobacco Bureau, once they have that permit, they are required to keep a log of what they are producing. It's my understanding from talking to the federal agents that once that's permitted and they check the logs, really the only way that they would come back out to the site would be if there were inconsistencies with the log. The ALE, which is the North Carolina regulating agency, they make visits to make sure that it is being mixed with something else so that it is not fit for consumption. So those are the different types of inspection that would take place.
Now, this would not be a First Amendment argument like the tattoo parlors were.
I do not believe so. I don't know if our attorney has anything to add.
What's the constitutional protected activity in producing ethanol?
Well, I don't know that there's a constitutionally protected activity. Clearly, it's not a First Amendment issue with reference to free speech. We did, however, view it in the same vein as the situation involving the tattoo parlors, or the lack of provision for those in our ordinance, that if we don't have anything in the ordinance and it's otherwise allowable, that we might have people producing ethanol in areas where we might not want to have them do so for zoning purposes, which would deal with some of the safety and health and property owner enjoyment issues that we typically look at in zoning. So it was from that perspective, and the fact that there was a person who came to the Commerce Department and expressed some interest in wanting to set up one of these stills. We want to
And-
be ahead of this situation rather than behind it.
Commissioner Poole?
And this is only for areas that are not within a municipality. Because this is Cabarrus, this is our ordinance, so
That is
if
correct.
someone, I just kind of want to clarify that, if someone watches this on Channel 22 or YouTube, they need to understand if they live in a municipality's boundaries, they are not covered by this.
That is correct, yes.
Are there any municipalities that have this included in their zoning ordinance?
None of the local folks have this specific type of use. Other ordinances do include fuel production, and I found one other county in North Carolina that regulates this type of use. It was the same kind of situation. They had a citizen ask whether or not they could do it. They went through the text amendment process. By that time, gas prices came back down, so they have not had anybody take advantage of that text amendment. But in that particular case, they were actually allowing 500 proof gallons to be stored on the site. That's where we started, so you can see that this has really been watered down from that. The maximum that somebody would have and be allowed here in Cabarrus County would be 55 gallons, and as most of you know, you probably have more flammable materials in your garage right now that are over 55. You know, if you have gasoline, gas mix, paint thinner, any of those things. So it really, you know, is a lot different from where we started looking at. And then also, as far as the waste material, the protein material, they would be allowed to have, you know, 2 55-gallon drums of that, or there's also a drying process involved with that. And folks can use that either as fertilizer, or it's also used to feed animals with. So in this, you know, in this case, there might potentially be drying, but that would be the maximum amount they would be able to store on the site.
What's the process of the waste? You know, you said they're able to have 2 55-gallon drums to dispose. Is it, you know, evaporate, or what is the waste?
Once it goes through the distillation process, you know, and the feedstock, in most cases, it's, you know, corn or different things like more vegetable oriented, and the ordinance says that it has to be that way. So they can't go in and use cellulose or wood fibers, which you can do, but we are not allowing that. So it has to be really, you know, it's essentially vegetable based. And then what happens is after it goes through the distillation process, you have the waste that ends up, which is kind of like what would be kind of like creamed corn, kind of like a mash. And then they take that, and then that's what they would dry. And, you know, several companies actually sell that in pellets for, you know, for feed. So if they do intend to use it that way, then they probably would have some screens laid out where they would dry it and then use it for their own animals. You know, we did include text that they do have to use it on site. They cannot sell it. So they really are somewhat restricted in what they can do and what they can produce. So if somebody had a 55-gallon drum that they were using as their boiler, they would really end up after 8 hours with about 5 gallons of ethanol to mix with one of the other agents, like diesel fuel or something like that.
And the main reason that we're looking at this is that if we don't do something because we don't have it in the ordinance, then somebody might decide that they want to produce ethanol, and then we would not have anything to keep it, for example, on a minimum of 3 acres of land, 100 feet from the neighbor, 60 feet from their own dwellings, et cetera. So
That's correct. 2 things. One is that we don't have anything, and number 2 is, you know, to allow, if there was a company that was interested in alternative fuels, an opportunity to locate here in Cabarrus County, because we do have some industrial properties that potentially could support these types of businesses.
So in reality, what we're doing, rather than, you know, allowing these, is, you know, we'll hear the voices coming out that we're allowing these to happen. They're allowed to happen now. What we're doing is actually restricting them and putting standards on what it would look like.
That's correct. Somebody
Yeah.
could argue that,
Mhm.
yes.
Any other discussion? Is this something we want to put under new business to ask for a public hearing?
So moved.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. This is on new business. Next is G5, or excuse me, G7. Which is the update on Raging Ridge Road Extension. Mr. Marshall.
I'm just glad it's not Raging Ridge Road rerouting. As you're probably aware, this Raging Ridge is a road that extends or provides access to Hickory Ridge High School and now Hickory Ridge Middle School off of Hickory Ridge Road. It was initially built, it is of course just one way in and out right now, so it was initially built so that it could possibly be extended to Stallings Road, which includes a creek crossing of Back Creek. There was a consensus of the Board of Commissioners and Board of Education that we pursue that extension so that we have two ways in and out of those two schools. Len Whitkey is also here this afternoon, and he and I have been working on this along with DOT in trying to find a solution to this, how we could maybe approach this as a joint project. And I'm really here to update you on that. It will not require any action on your part. Again, it is one way in and out. It requires a creek crossing. It was a fairly extensive creek crossing because of the volume of water that passes down that creek. As you're familiar with the amount of flooding that occurs on Stallings Road, there is a great deal of water that goes through that basin during flood events. We did meet with DOT early on to determine if there was any interest from our division office or district office to participate in this project. They indicated that they were interested in doing that jointly with us, but wanted to see more specifics in terms of what we were planning for construction as well as cost. And the initial cost estimate was somewhere around $1.5 million. We went back and employed W.K. Dixon to perform a study for us. They have recommended a 48-foot con span, which is essentially a pre-manufactured bridge culvert crossing that would go across Back Creek. That is less than what was initially proposed, and we've seen a lower cost estimate as a result. The trade-off there is this is designed for a 25-year flood event. Most bridges can be designed for a 100-year flood event, meaning that when you have a 100-year flood, which is 1% of the flood events, that entire amount of flood water would pass underneath the bridge unobstructed. With the 25-year, of course, if you exceed that 25-year storm, which a 50 or 100-year storm would, then it's designed so that the water goes over that bridge, and it would be inaccessible during that period. That is actually a fairly common thing to do. If you've been down Hickory Ridge going to the high school and middle school, there is a bridge just north of the high school on Hickory Ridge Road that was replaced this last summer. That is designed at a 25-year storm event, so there would be water going over in a 100-year event. Ultimately, if we do that, we do have to have what's called a conditional letter of map revision, which is it's a document that you would obtain from the Federal Emergency Management saying that you understand that this bridge in a 100-year event will have water going over it and can actually form somewhat of an obstruction, which can back up some water further upstream. So W.K. Dixon, again, has put together a proposal which we've accepted to start on that conditional letter, which is called a CLOMER, in which case you study and determine if there are any dwelling units or buildings that may be affected by that. And we have found just one storage building that appears to be affected by that. So I guess the summary is we've made a great deal of progress on this. We've determined a better route to take. The cost estimate now for really a full turnkey project design, construction oversight, and everything is about $1.1 million at this point, which is still a very high cost, but we have met again with DOT, Mr. Whitkey, the representatives from Harrisburg, and I met with them a few weeks ago, and they feel like there are some funds that they can put towards this project. So we're moving forward with some instructions that they gave us, and again, fine-tuning, as well as working on that CLOMER, and then we'll go back to them to put together a proposal where preferably that they would oversee the project and that would be jointly funded by Cabarrus County, NCDOT, and also the town of Harrisburg with some participation. Before we move forward with any of that, of course, a contract would have to be put in place, a firm cost estimate, and we would have to come back before you with any other action that needed to be taken.
Any questions for Mr. Marshall? Commissioner Meismer?
Does Cabarrus County own that property?
We do own the property that is to the south of Back Creek. In this diagram, you can see the bridge crossing. We do not own the property to the north, so there would have to be a purchase of some property from one of those adjacent owners. It's almost entirely in the 100-year floodplain, so it's property that they would have restricted use of anyway, but we would have to work something out in purchasing that. And that was included, at least an estimate of the cost of that was included in that $1.1 million estimate.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the difference in price, if it's the
The difference in price, or the reduction in price, was it would take a 70-foot wide span to allow a 100-year flood to pass underneath it, a
Right.
70-foot bridge. By reducing it to this 48-foot con span, that's where it reduced the
Okay.
price.
And what's the difference in the price? I didn't catch that.
It was originally $1.5 million, and now it's
So it's
$1.1 million.
Okay, so $400,000.
Mhm.
Is there anything that can be done if we move forward with this bridge, is there anything in the design process that would slow down the Back Creek going down into those neighborhoods?
Just by the nature of it, since it does form an obstruction to a 100-year flood, there will be some backup that would actually reduce some of the peak flood downstream, but it would be negligible. The majority of that would be designed to pass over the bridge. And we've looked, and again, W.K. Dixon gave some brief, gave a brief view look at this. It is a huge volume of water passing through that basin, so we've looked to see if there were some areas where we could provide additional storage, but there's just so much water that in one of those flood events, it really isn't feasible to provide a good storage area for that.
Is the cost differential $400,000, is it that much advantage to do the 25-year flood as opposed to biting the bullet, doing the 100-year flood bridge? I mean,
Well, and again, looking at this diagram in front of you, along the top of the picture, there's a black curving line. Sorry, I didn't bring a pointer with me.
This
That's the 100-year flood. So what ends up happening, even if you build a bridge that allows a 100-year flood to pass underneath it, Stallings Road then gets covered by the 100-year flood, so it's still inaccessible. So there isn't a huge advantage to doing that, because what you'll end up happening is you will be able to go west on Stallings Road, but even, again, as you go further up, there are some places where the water gets very close also. NCDOT is doing some additional study. Of course, with the double tracking project, the proposal for the rail, the proposal is to extend Roberta Road to Stallings Road. So they have started doing some hydraulic studies along Stallings Road to look at some improvements to raise that roadbed above, or to improve some culverts, whatever is necessary to make it more accessible, but we're still not sure if that'll happen.
why is there 100-year flood lines? Oh, excuse me, this is the 100-year flood fringe, and that's the boundary?
And there, of course, there'd be one on each side of the stream, but I think those are actually...
This says 100-year flood fringe, and
Yeah.
I've never seen a fringe versus a boundary.
The actual is the one that's closer to the stream is a regularly wetted area, so I believe it's just mislabeled. That's an area that in almost any storm event is going to have water passing over it. The 100-year flood fringe is what you would look at as the 100-year boundary.
While Dixon is out there, is there anything they can do with a retention? I think we have a retention pond out there already. Is there anything that can be done there to kind of slow down the water to help out the people downstream?
We will be, the way this is designed, there will be some additional excavation, which will actually enlarge that slightly, because they'll excavate some of the dirt from that adjacent property to use on-site to build up the roadbed going to the Conspan Bridge. But again, it would only be a negligible increase in that amount of storage. The The 100-year flood volumes measure in the millions of gallons passing through. I mean, you're looking at a basin that carries probably as much water as is coming into Cottle Creek in many cases, in the Cottle Creek Reservoir in many cases. So you would need a very large reservoir to affect a flood.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Marshall? What is the desire of the board? I think I look at it as we can either do nothing, or we consider partnering with DOT and Harrisburg in the construction of this. At the total cost would be approximately $1.1 million.
And we will bring this back to you. We're
Right.
continuing to do the background work to further fine tune. We need to make sure that we can build this bridge. That's what the Clomer process is for. So we'd get permission to build, and then we would move forward with more details. We would actually sit down with DOT and put together a contract for that joint participation, as well as determining what Harrisburg's participation in this may be. Harrisburg would control, because it's in their extraterritorial jurisdiction, the actual road construction, including sidewalks, width of travel lanes, how many travel lanes, and what we're proposing now, in order to bring the cost down a little bit, would require an exception on their part. So we would pursue that also. But we would get all that together and determine where the funds from DOT would come from, as well as any county funds that would go into it, and bring it back to you.
With the design of this Clomer Bridge, does it allow people to have access to, if there is a linear park placed along Back Creek, would they be able to access or continue to access the linear park, walking trail or something like that? I don't know what a
Yeah.
Clomer Bridge looks like. I don't know if it's a big old pipe that they just stick in the ground.
This is, from what I understand, it is essentially a box culvert, so a squared culvert opening. It does not have a bottom to it, so you actually have the creek bed remains in its place. So I suppose that because it is wider than the actual creek bed, then it would be possible to go underneath it or to come back out to the road, and we'll have sidewalks at the road, at least on one side, so you could come back up to the road and cross over there. If you're familiar with the property, this is very near their football and baseball on the back side of the high school there.
Does the path of Back Creek, is that conducive to any sort of walking trail, especially behind a school?
It really is. There's a lot of property that the county owns because of the middle school and the high school. There's a lot of property there that would be very conducive to a trail along that creek. Again, when it floods, it is a major flood event, but the majority of the time, you can see it's a stream that's within its beds in a very mature stream bed and really in fairly good condition.
Well, I would ask that if this board says to continue to move forward with it, that Mrs. Strong or somebody in her office be advised, so that down the road, if there is a walking trail that's placed in there, either by the county or by local citizens, that we've thought about that in the future, so that they can walk that culvert, or that Colmer can be wide enough that a walkway can be put in it, or at least walk around it and have it accessed. Some of the younger kids don't mind walking through water and creeks, but
We'll explore that.
but I would think so. Anything else from our board? Thank you. Next that we have is G8, is a resolution opposing legislative changes that result in counties housing misdemeanants and felons.
The resolution itself is at the very bottom.
Okay. This is just the cover sheet that we have, but we also have the actual resolution that's below. Let's see if I can.
Here's the left on the there, and just scroll all the way down to the bottom.
Page 259, looks like. We talked about this earlier. This is a discussion by the North Carolina legislature's Joint Appropriations Committee to having counties take care of or house people, and I will turn it over to Mr. Day, but I believe I thought I saw it was 12 months.
And I've seen that too, so I would suggest that, in fact, the cover sheet recognizes that and says misdemeanors and felons. So I would suggest that if you adopt this, that you, in each place where it says misdemeanors, also add and felons.
Yeah.
And might also suggest that you consider suspending the rules and adopting this now, so things can happen fast in Raleigh. And if you want to get out there with your opposition to this, it's probably a good time to go ahead and do it.
The cost to the county, just in regards to having a facility to put people in, is about $3.6 million. It adds to our expenses every year.
Right, Ms. Dubois had calculated that along with the assistance from Chief Deputy Hunt. But what that doesn't recognize is that our facilities would immediately be overcrowded.
And approximately 363 inmates on the floor in the new facility, not using the old facility.
Okay, and I want to make a comment. I've had people respond, which makes me happy when somebody listens to our meetings and then responds to me. Two things that I've had people say is, one, they want to know what's going on in the legislature, because I keep saying, you need to watch what's happening in Raleigh, because that's getting pushed down to us. And this is a perfect example of what's going on in Raleigh that we've pushed down to us. And then I've had other people say, well, you guys already built that big old jail, you need to fill it up. So I want to make sure everybody understands that I have no problem filling up the jail if that's the case. However, if the legislature wants us to house people, I want the money to come with them instead of our taxpayers having to foot the bill. And what this is indicating, that it would be our property taxpayers would be footing the bill for roughly $3,678,000 that is currently not anywhere in our budget. And that would greatly impact our budget for the next year. And that would be bad for all of us. That's enough said. But I didn't realize about having that many. It would put us into overcrowding to that extent. So I hope that that our citizens will look at this. I've been encouraging people to go to the website and see what bills are being introduced, because there are a lot of things going on in Raleigh that may or may not be getting covered. And to the county manager, I appreciate the level of communication that we're getting from you and from the association to keep us apprised of the bills that are being introduced in Raleigh. Because otherwise, frankly, it's a lot to keep track of. But this would be horrible for any citizen in Cabarrus County to have to foot this bill. And I hope that everybody's paying attention to what's going on in Raleigh.
I want to add on to that, since I was heavily involved in it, obviously, since 2001, is that in 2003 we actually had an evaluation done and a study done of what future jail populations look like, and that's what the current structure is based on. But it was based on the assumption that not that we would receive a whole totally new class of inmates from the state, which changes totally the picture as far as the timeline, and it would move up the envelope of when another board of commissioners would have to start discussing building another jail. And that facility is designed, based on the study we had done, is designed to last us for 20 to 25 years, and based on the category of inmates that were in that study. So that's what would come down to, is that it would move that construction of not the second tower as we had a lot of discussion about, but us having to go out and look for something else and do something else. And we've just now we're not even got it open yet.
Some of the things that I think that, I don't know if Chief Hunt was able to factor in, is if we start housing felons, I would not be surprised if it doesn't change the dynamics of the facility that we have to house them in. And instead of having a facility that's going to be a temporary in nature in regards to somebody, to now it's going to be more permanent for 12 months. I wouldn't be surprised that along with that isn't a requirement from the state government as well as the federal government to provide some services to them that we do not have to provide for someone that has to serve a sentence of 90 days or less, which is what we have right now. So that I don't know if programs are going to have to be offered, if, I don't know what has to be done, but I'm certain that Chief Hunt has done everything that he knows of. But I would not be surprised that, although we're talking about 3.6 right now, that in reality it's not quite a bit more because of what is coming. It's sort of like the school system is, okay, you build a school, but then all of a sudden your class size has to be a certain amount, and then you have to provide this many classes and these many instructors, and so it starts adding the cost. And we have, I believe last week, the governor recommended that our savings that the county has worked hard at creating, or not to create, but to save, be used to fund more programs from the state that is not in our budget right now. So that's a recommendation from Governor Perdue to pull out our savings and have that pay for these extra expenses, which in turn will affect our bond rating, which will in turn affect anybody that invests in those bonds, so that if you are in the financial market and you buy it, then it potentially will affect you there. So that
we've been fiscally responsible through good leadership, and then we can potentially be penalized because we've been trying to be more frugal than some of the other counties. Shouldn't say that one. We've been trying to be very frugal and be responsible, and then the governor's budget says, oh, well, thanks for doing that on our behalf. We'll suck that away from you. So.
Well, as I was telling somebody this weekend, is that because of our fiscal responsibility, we're having to pay for the fiscal irresponsibility of people in Raleigh.
The same thing as several years ago when the just lost my train of thought.
Well, why don't you wait
I'll
one
think
second.
about it.
Commissioner Burge, did you have something to say? Commissioner Burge, did you have anything to say? I didn't know if...
Well, I would make a motion to suspend the rules for this item as well.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Do we have a motion to approve the resolution as presented to us in opposition of the housing misdemeanors and felons in county jails?
So moved. And we'll change the language to add "and felons."
Right.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The next we have is G9, which is the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners request feedback on top state budget concerns and top non-budget related legislative priority. That is on page 212 of our.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Okay. These are the meetings that are going to be occurring throughout the state. Is that correct, Mrs. Honeycutt? Okay. There are the district meetings coming up in April. Let's get back to those. 6th, 7th, 14th, 20th, and 21st in Buncombe, Wilkes, Randolph, Cumberland, and Martin. Commissioner Cruth, will you be attending any of those?
I will most likely be attending the one in Randolph County, and I may be attending the one in Cumberland County as well. But
Okay. We've been asked to identify on the next, what Cabarrus County's #1 issue or concern about the state budget. and some other information that's in here that you can see on the question. That's on page 214. We have any discussion at this point in time in regards to these matters?
One thing to add, it's not in here, there's at each meeting, they're going to be handing out to each county a meeting in a box, so to speak, and asking every county to hold, and I know we haven't had one yet, but hold a meeting with their legislative delegation, and just to discuss these things. And of course, what's happened is that things have moved so fast this session that it's like, a lot of pent-up frustration, I think, for the past 100 years, but that, a lot of stuff may be done before we ever get to have those meetings. But asking each county to have that, to go over the legislative goals with their legislative delegation, and also to discuss these things. And, it's a part of promoting it, to get all commissioners statewide. There'll be some other things coming out, too, that will be culminate with the County Assembly Day in May in Raleigh, of how do we, to get as many counties as possible speaking with the legislative delegations, to let them know how we feel about some of these things.
Mr. Chairman, if I mention a couple of things. Specifically, the NCACC is asking what's your number one issue of concern with the state budget, and then what's your number one issue of concern with a non-budget related legislative issue. The issue you just took action on, I believe, is what I've seen is the most potentially expensive item that could hit counties. There's a number of things out there, and there's some anticipated changes to several social service related issues, but I think overall the greatest potential is that issue, and that might be something you consider for your number one priority. Based on the legislative agenda you adopted and the bills that have been filed, I would say that the annexation reform bills and related bills are probably the non-budget item that the most clearly associates with your current legislative agenda, but that's something you can certainly think about.
Well, one other thing that we're going to talk about a little bit later, I think, is equally concerning, is what the governor is recommending in regards to construction dollars and shifting state school funding responsibilities to the counties. I mean, that's something we're going to talk about in a little bit. I think the jail issue is very much a concern, as well as the concern in regards to funding through the schools, additional funding through the schools, and cutting the lottery proceeds. I mean, I don't know what to.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to pick one, huh?
Well, yeah.
The main thing is that it's just unfunded, pushing down what should be a state financial responsibility of the counties. I think we put that as the issue, and then underneath it we can say, these are examples of that, whether it's the jail or school construction costs or the movement of what should be renamed the North Carolina Non-Education Lottery. Because if it goes down to 10% for education, it's obviously a bill of goods that was sold that.
With the advertisement I saw recently, I thought it was the Ric Flair lottery.
Well, there you go. Woo! Could be. But I mean, we can list those things as being, I think I don't know that unfunded mandates is the right term, but it's just a matter of they're pushing down the responsibilities, the state's responsibilities on the backs of the counties. However you want to word that, but I think that's.
The concern I have is that we hear time and time again, we're an extension of the state, and therefore we have that responsibility, and we can just raise our tax rate to cover it. The problem, the problem with that theory is that our citizens may not have selected those programs to be started and to be created, but yet we're now being forced to fund because somebody in another county or a representative from another county thought it was good and got it passed. And then they're outspending themselves, so then they push it down to a county that we may not have accepted that responsibility. So it's not just, it's a mandate, but it's a mandate that our citizens have not requested, nor agreed to fund in the past.
Well, and I think one of the things that happens, and this is locally, and we have seen it, it then becomes a local political issue where people demand that we go cut the local budget, local county budget, and to use it, it becomes I like to say, it becomes a political football here locally. And the public then does not understand or that how much of our budget is there because of mandates coming down from the state. And more and more, a higher percentage of people's property taxes locally are being used to fund state government, and state government was never meant to be funded with local property taxes. That funds local, our local schools, that funds our local needs and local services. And, but it's disconcerting to me that we get that, and then when we have to then cut the budget locally, we have to go after those programs that affect citizens the most here in the local community that help with the quality of life that we can no longer provide because we're having to use our property tax to pay for a bloated state bureaucracy that needs to be dealt with. And the way it needs to be dealt with is to take a sledgehammer to everything in Raleigh and start over. I mean, that's my feeling. That's
one approach.
Don't mean to hold back, but
It's interesting, every week it seems like there's a discussion about something else that's going to come to the counties. I mean, our last meeting we were discussing the roads being passed off to the counties, and if they pass everything off, there's going to be nothing that the state government is going to be responsible for. One of the concerns too is the new health care law and how that's going to expand Medicaid, and that's going to be a big concern for the county is when we have to start, putting in the dollars to hire more staff, the Department of Social Services to fulfill those needs. So they're all important.
What was interesting too, yesterday we got an email, I think all of us got it, about the deep water port in Brunswick County that has been already removed before last year, I think, from the state budget. But yet, the people that work there, and I don't know whether she's or not, I may be speaking out of turn here, but it appears to me that we got people that are their salaries are being paid by our tax dollars directly going to counties lobbying us to pass a resolution in support of that when what it would do financially to the state and when, as far as what I've read, is not necessary for the state to have because we already have a port in Wilmington, we have one in Morehead City. And, but lobbying for that, and coming to commissioners and asking us to support that and thinking a lot of that. But, that's what we have a lot of happening, I think, is that we have that, sense that, I don't know, is it a sense of entitlement in Raleigh? But.
Well, what we need to do is next election, we need to change the people representing us in Raleigh. And also, if they send all these mandates down and we don't have the money to do this stuff, what can they do if we don't do it?
They will, well, I'm not certain what they will do. I wouldn't be surprised if they just stopped allowing us access to the sales tax revenue that we're allowed to receive. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Dubois, but what I understand, Mr. Day, what I understand is that in years past, we would have the sales tax and we'd pass it on to the state. Now it gets paid to the state and the state transfers it to us so that they would just cut off the sales tax revenue if that's, if that is one way to do it.
A prime example of something is something they did in the past is when Union County was fighting Medicaid. They would not pay their Medicaid bill, and the state just took it out of their sales tax distribution before they gave it to them. So they got their money in directly.
So, in principle, it's a fight, but what is it, to win the battle or win the war?
Well, we got the highest tax state in the union now, I think. And yet they can't balance the budget in Raleigh. It seems to me like we just got the wrong people up there working for us.
Well, it is.
This year's a new world up there. Hopefully we'll see what, they're making sausage right now, and let's see what happens at the end. So,
So in regards to this is whether we do, number one is unfunded mandates and then list the schools and list the, or just list those as being the top two priorities in regards to the housing misdemeanants and felons, as well as pushing down additional expenses associated with the schools. I think that would be good. In regards to the non-budget related items, the annexation is a big one. And I can't think of the other one that we had on our legislative goals or requests that they are addressing. But at least the annexation is the number one. The annexation is number one.
One thing that could turn in, it's not on any our list, or I think the NCACC list has come up the last few weeks too. I'd like for us to add to that is because of what it could do to long-term is I think there's a proposal that they eliminate all the shelter inspections from the Department of Agriculture. And what that does now, it ensures is the commercial breeders and animal shelters are meeting certain standards. My concern, if they cut that out completely, then two things. One of them is add another one that could roll down at the local level that we would need, to ensure here in Cabarrus County that any shelters are operating because of the public health issues associated with it. And the second thing is that if all the states around North Carolina have standards and we don't, then that giant sucking sound you hear is all the unscrupulous breeders and shelters coming into North Carolina, which could cause bigger problems down the road for us. And so.
Anything else? I don't think that needs to be voted on by our board.
So we can just put together the things that you discussed and have that ready then for when your meeting occurs, the district meetings.
Now, that takes care of G9. We have two additions is G10 and G11. Let's see here.
Okay, on G10, last year, we declared April as National Donate Life Month in Cabarrus County. And I had forgotten it last month to put it on the agenda, in all honesty. And for information purposes, my niece is a nurse in Cabarrus County, and this is one of her big hot ticket items. And last year, it was brought to us to fly the Donate Life America flag outside this facility, and we still have the flag from last year. So I asked that we consider the proclamation, which has been updated for 2011, to designate April as, or for Cabarrus County as Donate Life Month, and encourage our citizens to consider organ, eye, and tissue donor registry and participation in that. There are over 3,400 North Carolina residents and over 110,000 people nationwide that are in need of life-saving transplants. And I would also mention on the school board, we have Lynn Shue, who most definitely can speak to this. So I would ask that we suspend the rules on this also and go ahead and pass the proclamation and begin flying the flag for the month of April.
Any questions for Ms. Poole? We have a motion to suspend rules first, and then, well, motion to suspend the rules in order to adopt the proclamation.
So moved.
We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. We have a motion to adopt the proclamation as presented by Commissioner Poole.
So moved.
We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next is the resolution opposing the loss of school construction dollars and the shift of state school funding responsibilities to counties.
Okay, likewise, I believe all of us received the attached, the resolution that Harnett County had previously adopted, and they were
Harnett.
kind enough to send it out to all the other counties.
Commissioner Poole. Harnett.
Harnett, what did I say?
Harnett.
Never, I don't know. I'm sorry. We have the resolution in front of us. And again, it's timely based on what's going on in Raleigh and the legislature, and I think we're all very much aware, Chairman White already spoke about the loss of school construction dollars. We use funds available to us to help make the payments on the schools that have already been constructed, and I think it would be a loss to us to not have the funds available. So I've asked that this be placed on our agenda tonight for the same reason, to go ahead in a timely manner and approve the resolution and make our voice heard as far as the loss of school construction dollars.
Any questions? We have a motion to suspend the rules to adopt this resolution and distribute copies as needed or requested.
So moved.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Do we have a motion to adopt this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. What I think may be appropriate, since we have adopted quite a few resolutions, is maybe on the 18th, if we can have these resolutions, that we can read them, so everybody will know as well. Either put them in the agenda, but have it so that we can read them either at the beginning of the meeting or at the end of the meeting, so everybody knows what was adopted and the reason why they were adopted. Please, ma'am. As far as I can tell, we've addressed all of the business but for the APAC recommendations that Commissioner Kruth is going to present. Have I missed anything, Mrs. Honeycutt?
Not unless you would like to give updates on boards and committees now or at the regular meeting.
Is it all right if we just do it at the regular meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Why don't we take about a 10-minute break, and then we'll start up with Commissioner Kruth. I think we have your presentation in the agenda. If not,
Yeah, it's then at the end under the additions, and we'll go through that, but I also just want to talk, just kind of a brief, go back and
Okay.
kind of refresh where we're at, where we've been, and where we, want to go, and those things, so.
good. Thank you. We'll take a 10-minute break.